Probably the most misunderstood and underreported story of the last 10 years has been Congress lifting the 40-year ban on oil exports. This article from the Wall Street Journal talks about it in a way that I think folks, when they read it, can actually grasp what happened. Because it wasn't even something they were considering doing even a few months before it actually happened. The misunderstood part that I've seen come to my comments about this issue in Venezuela is asked you, well, why did it all fall apart? And the U.S. loves to run out this thing about socialism and poor policy and investment and greed and corruption and graft and all this kind of stuff, when nothing could be further from the truth. It was a calculated maneuver by the United States to enter into the oil export markets. And I'm going to show you in this video using charts showing exactly how and when and why they did it. Now, the first thing you have to understand is there's a difference between oil producer and oil exporter. Two entirely different things. You also have to understand that places like the US, Russia, Canada, China, they aren't members of OPEC. When you talk about US oil, all there really is are US oil companies. The US doesn't control its entire oil supply. We have a strategic reserve, but we don't direct oil policy for Chevron or ConocoPhillips or any of the big oil companies. They do what's best for their bottom line, not what's best for America. So let me show you these numbers first so you can get a comprehension of what's really going on. Here's a list of the world's top oil producers. Okay, number 1, of course, we are. Number 2, Saudi Arabia. Number 3, Russia. 4, China. 5, Canada. Now, these are the people that make the most oil, not that export the most oil. For that list, you need to look at this. Number 1, Saudi Arabia. 2, Russia. 3, Iraq. 4, Canada. 5, UAE. It's like, oh, wait a minute, where's the US? All the way down here at number 13, below Venezuela still to this day. We still export less oil than Venezuela does, even having imploded. Now, here's the thing I think that would shock most people, knowing that we're the number 1 producer of oil. Here's a list of the importers, the number 1 importers of oil. We're number 3, and technically we're really number 2 because the European Union is all of those European countries combined. But these two numbers here, China, these are 2018 numbers. So even producing the most oil in the world, we still are the number 2 importer. So that would beg the question, I think, with a lot of people logically, why are we exporting oil if we can't even fill our own needs? If we have to be bringing in oil, why are we selling it to anybody else? That's the key. That's what I think when Americans realize what's actually going on, they'll lose their minds. Because this is the allegation I'm making. There's going to come a day when we are going to be exporting oil to other countries, and there's going to be oil shortages, gasoline shortages in this country. And prices will be out of the world, and there will still be oil being exported out of this country because they'll make more money selling it to other countries than supplying it here. That's what's going to happen. Now, let's go back to where we started. Now, this is a December 16, 2015 article. This was right when everything started to really go south for Venezuela. This was when we lifted the ban. The U.S. had banned exporting oil because of what happened back in '73. It was a 40-year ban. There was the oil embargo. The Saudis didn't allow there to be oil because of our policy with Israel, and so we passed a law stating that all oil produced in America stayed in America. The only exception was Canada, and it was a tiny amount, 400,000 barrels. So let me just read this for you to show you exactly how big of a surprise this was. In a move considered unthinkable even a few months ago, congressional leaders have agreed to lift the nation's 40-year-old ban on oil exports, a historic action that reflects political and economic shifts driven by a boom in U.S. oil drilling. So what was happening here was that we were finding a way to weasel our way into the oil markets. Not we, the U.S. people, of course, U.S. big oil companies. Now, there had to be a way figured out how to do that without glutting the market and destroying the price of oil. But there wasn't one. So we had to do it ahead of time. Now, we've covered this before. October 22, 2015. The 4 reasons oil plummeted. It had nothing to do with demand. It had nothing to do with demand destruction or anything like that. It had to do exactly with the U.S. getting together with its buddies in OPEC and telling them to react in the opposite way so that Venezuela would crater. When Venezuela craters and their oil output tanks, then the U.S. can step in and take their place and export in their place without destroying the markets. And what do we see here? This is, like I said, 2015. Alrighty, unrelated to futures, oil inventories have risen more than expected, the Energy Information Administration reported. The U.S. commercial crude oil inventories rose by 4.5 million barrels from the previous week. At almost 500 million barrels, U.S. crude oil inventories are at the highest level in at least the last 80 years. Meaning that even though we had more oil than we knew what to do with, we were still increasing production. Any other time that happens, you decrease production to maintain the price. But since we, at that time, weren't oil exporters, didn't hurt us if the price cratered. It's only going to hurt us now. You see, now the price is going to do nothing but go up and up and up and up, and nothing is going to stop it. Because what's happened, and the oil companies know this, is that we can't put enough oil into the markets fast enough to make up for the sanctions on Iran and the sanctions on Venezuela. So they're talking about right now $140 a barrel oil by next year. And here's the thing, usually prior to 2015, when this kind of thing happened, there would be a natural cyclical event that would bring it back down. It would called demand destruction. That means businesses would crater. That means there would be shrinkage in economies to where there wasn't as much demand. And when the demand goes away, the price goes down. That's not going to happen this time because the U.S. is now, not the U.S., you and me, not our government, not good for us. U.S. oil companies now can get rich selling our oil to Africa, to China, even to places in South America, to India. And there won't be anything that happens in the U.S. to stop that because those are the big taxpayers, so to speak. Those increased profits mean increased revenue to Washington. So Washington is not going to do anything to stop that, even though we might have $6, $7 a gallon oil. We'll still be exporting oil. Even though we'll be the number one producer, we'll still be importing oil too. Because everything, the entire calculus has changed since 2015. It's no longer about the political dynamic of how bad it is for the incumbent when oil prices or gas prices are high. Now it's going to be about U.S. oil companies making as much money as they can. Because remember, it's not you and me that pays taxes, it's them, because they're the big corporations. They're the ones paying most of the bill. So they're going to be the ones that direct this policy. And this is why Venezuela had to be attacked. Their ability to export oil had to be cratered so that we could basically take their place in the markets. So just understand there is a difference between exporter, producer, and importer. We are still the number 2 importer of oil in the world, even though we are the number 1 producer. And we're not even in the top 10 exporters. But you watch. In fact, there's been talk, and I've seen it around on all sorts of different investment websites, that the U.S. might be poised to be the number 1 exporter very, very soon. So remember this, it's going to be almost an impossible thing to logically understand there being oil shortages and gasoline shortages in this country while we're exporting oil hand over fist. It doesn't seem like that would be logical, but that's what they'll do because they can make more money, so they can maintain the market. Because us keeping it here, we would lose that market. Somebody else would step in, like Venezuela, and we can't have that. Sometimes you just sell things at a cost or lower just to maintain your market and your relationship with your buyer so that they don't go anywhere else and figure you'll just make it up down the road. So anyway, just wanted to cover that today. And it's one of those things that my audience is, and I've said this before, the smartest, best audience on YouTube. And I know a lot of you guys can grasp this. For those of you out there that are really well schooled in the investment and oil markets, if there are folks out there that have questions, please go down to the comment sections and engage them and bring them up to speed on this, because I know that you know what I'm talking about because I've had these conversations with you. So anyway, like, share, subscribe. Thank you so much, and we will talk to you next time. Thank you.